So we just talked about how to get a number into scientific notation. We took those really, really big numbers and those really, really small numbers and we wrote them in a simpler way. Now we're going to go backwards. Okay, so we're going to be given scientific notation and our job is to get that actual number. Or in a more formal way, we could call it into standard notation. Okay, so standard notation is when we have a number that is the actual number. Okay, and I wrote that in quotations just because it's kind of a different definition. Okay, it's kind of the best definition I can come up with is just the actual number, what it ends up being. So like for example, instead of writing a number in scientific notation, I would just write 8,700. This would be standard notation. Or like 83 would be standard notation. The actual number. Okay, I'm going to have a few steps for us to follow when we're going from scientific notation back to standard notation. Okay, again, it might be a little simpler than just following the steps every time, so if you ever need to forget about the steps, that's okay. But my first step is writing down the number without the times 10. Okay, for example, if I use, we can use 5.3 times 10 to the 4th power. Okay, I'll use that as my example. Okay, you can choose to write it on the side if you would like, okay, or you can just kind of listen to me as I'm writing down. Okay, so if I'm using 5.3 times 10 to the 4th power as my example from going from scientific notation back to standard notation, the first thing to do is write the number without the times 10. So I have 5.3. The next step is we're going to move the decimal. Okay, and we move our decimal to the left or the right, depending on what our exponent is telling us. Okay, obviously if we have a positive exponent, we're going to move our decimal to the right to make it a big number. Okay, and if we have a negative as our exponent, we're going to move it to the left because that means we have a small number. So for this example, I have 5.3, and since my exponent up here was 4, and it's positive, I'm going to make it a big number. Okay, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we're going to rewrite the number. And add in zeros if necessary. If needed. Okay, so like for example here, I have these 3 extra spaces down here, okay, that I moved my decimal, so I can fill those 3 spaces with zeros. They're kind of like my placeholder. Okay, always add in your commas. Okay, so that would be our final answer. Okay, so we just took a number 5.3 times 10 to the 4th and brought it into its standard notation, or its actual meaning. Make sure you're pausing the video if I'm going too fast, okay, because you need to have all these parts written down. I'm going to try and go through a few of them so that we kind of get the idea here. Okay, if we remember, my first step is to just write the number without the times 10. And since I have a negative exponent, I know I'm going to go to the left because it's going to become a smaller number. And I'm going to move it one place. So that means I have a spot to fill in a 0 with. Okay, and my third step is telling me to just rewrite the number. I always want you to rewrite it, okay, because this looks a little messy here. So always rewrite the number off to the side. Okay, I'm going to go down to number 19. And this one we have 2 times 10 to the 5th. So I'm just going to rewrite my number 2. Now, same as before, if there's not a decimal there, we can just add it in, okay? Because there's always a decimal in every number. It's just not always written there. And since my exponent is positive, I know I'm going to go to the right with my moving of my decimal. I'm going to move it 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and I can fill all those spots in with zeros. So I end up adding in 5 zeros for this one. Okay, and I put my comma in, and that would be my final answer. Okay, I'm going to go back up to number 18. Okay, we have 2 times 10 to the negative first power. So I rewrite my number 2, add in my decimal. Since it's a negative here, I know I'm going to go to the left. I'm going to move it 1 space because that's what it says, 1 time. So now I have 0.2 as my answer. I didn't have to add in any zeros in this case. Okay, you're not always adding zeros in, only if you're moving your decimal more spaces, then you have numbers. Number 20, I have 804 times 10 to the positive 2. Since it's positive, I know it's going to be a bigger number, so I want to move my decimal to the right. So I rewrite my number, 804, add my decimal because it's not there, and then I'm going to move it 2 times because that's what my exponent says. Okay, and I can fill in with zeros. Always rewrite your number, okay, because that looks messy. So I'll rewrite it as 80,400. Hey, make sure you're pausing the video, okay, if I went too fast, or rewind it and rewatch some parts if you weren't sure what I did. Okay, and ask questions. You can finish this worksheet, and then you can do the quizzes at the end.